This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Any questions? Any questions, guys, that I can take? Anyone? Any questions that I can take?
Hi Kiran, can you tell me
Good.
the what is agile methodology?
The one that we are following is an agile methodology. The very first thing that I started with was agile methodology, wherein your development happens in sprints, when you have a proper planning, when you have a proper delivery mechanism, etc. So the very first thing that we started was agile methodology itself. So we said, what is waterfall? What is agile? So if you want to just understand elaborately, just look at the first introduction video of Azure Devops to understand what really agile methodology is. Yes, any more questions here? Anyone? Any questions still here? Right, so just let me put it in this way. Let's get started. Let's say Azure repos, and this is where we are. So I have the Azure repository. I have branches inside this repository, and I have one main branch, sorry, called a develop branch called develop, and all our developers, whoever is let's say working in our project, is using a feature pull request to go ahead and let's say merge their changes into the develop branch out there. And why are they doing that? Why am I using a feature branch? Why not directly merge it, or why not directly let's say go ahead and commit onto my develop branch? Branch policies, you have policies that are restricting you, and one of the policy is telling that okay, fine, at least one reviewer must approve your code out here. So you have policies out there which is restricting you to go ahead and do any kind of a change. And in here, all my developers are going ahead using this particular develop branch, using a feature pull request, or using a feature branch, doing a pull request, and then merging all the changes. And as and when the changes are merged, I now have a continuous integration trigger pipeline, which is going ahead and giving me the artifact, going ahead giving me something called as the artifact as an end output. Artifacts, artifact out here as the end output out here. So this is what I'm getting at the end of the pipeline delivery, or at the end of let's say the continuous integration trigger. Again, on day before yesterday, we checked out what is self-hosted agents and how can they help us, and how do you configure a self-hosted agent, and how do you put the self-hosted agent in place. This is something that we were doing. So today let's go back into our dev.azure devops, dev.azure.com, and let's wait for this load. And this is our repository which is called Android, and inside which we have something called develop 9.0, inside which you have all the code. So all the developers have merged the code, and if you look at the history, there are a lot of pull requests that you can see, and each and every pull request has done some of the other commit onto your code out here. So this is doing test again and all that stuff. Let's come back and let's go into pipelines. And in the pipelines, you have a first build pipeline that is running on a self-hosted agent the other day. So what I'll do is I'll change this to Azure hosted because I deleted that self-hosted agent. So I won't be able to run my pipeline there. So I'll come back to Azure hosted. I'll say this is Windows latest. So not Ubuntu latest, but Windows latest. I'll place it here. And also in the triggers, I have a continuous integration trigger that I do have. So I'll just save. I'll say migrated back to hosted agent. See this also. I have my hosted agent in place. You can also replace it with a self-hosted agent. In my case, I do not have a self-hosted agent today. I'll have to create one if I don't. And this pipeline will trigger every time when there is a let's say a continuous integration, meaning whenever a developer let's say commits all his changes onto a branch, the pipeline gets triggered, and the end of the trigger I will be getting something called as the artifact in the form of a .zip folder out here. So I'm getting the artifact in the form of a .zip folder as such out there. Now, one thing that I still have an issue with is that, see, when you are a developer, let's think of it like a developer out here. Let's say that there are about 10 developers in my project. Each and every developer is doing a commit, or each and every developer is doing at least one commit in a particular given hour, which means that in that 1 hour, how many pull requests will I have? How many pull requests do I let's say have out there? 10 developers, one commit each. So if one commit, 10 commits, which means how many pull requests? 10 pull requests, because each and every commit is just equal to one particular pull request. So I have 10 PRs. See, but the issue when you are working as a development team is that under one commit, you tend to change a lot of files. In your VS Code, you go there, the development actually is a lot. So you change a lot of files out there and then try to, let's say, commit this out. So let's say each and every PR is at least having 100 files or 100 file of changes out there. So that will become 100 into, let's say, 10, which is about 1,000 changes inside each and every commit. This number can also, let's say, be bigger, be smaller, and all that stuff, depending upon how your development activity is going around. Now, who needs to take the responsibility of approving all these pull requests? The lead of a development team and etc. So there is a lead of a development team who, now imagine you are this lead. You are now this lead of this particular development team. You are coming each and every hour. You at least need to go through 1,000 files. At least, I'm telling about at least, which means you need to manually look at each and every file, understand whether the syntax and everything is correct, see whether there are any issues, and then go ahead and make sure that, okay, fine, I approve that particular pull request so that continuous integration can trigger. If you are not doing, if you are a lead, you are not doing your job properly, which means that, let's say, as a lead, you are just not monitoring one team, you are monitoring 10 different teams. Each and every team is doing the same thing. Now imagine your job doubles. It is 10 times more than what you're doing right now. As a lead, your job is just not going ahead and approving pull requests. This is not just your job. This is one of your job. This is 1% of your job. As a lead, you'll also be looking into, let's say, future development activities. You'll also be looking into R&D and everything. You'll also be looking into recruiting, hiring, and all that stuff. Which means that you, as a lead, you have very less time in your hand to, let's say, go ahead and, let's say, review all these things out. Let's say you are the only lead in your project. You have now the responsibility of approving all your code, and because of less time availability, what you're doing is that you're asking your developer, telling it, okay, fine, did you do everything right? Developer simply says, yes, I did everything right. I'll say, okay, fine, I'll approve this out. As and when I approve it, all the changes get merged into the developer branch. Let's say these changes have a lot of bugs, they have a lot of issues. They go, either they fail, your build pipeline fails because there are a lot of issues out there, or sometimes what happens, your build pipelines get succeeded and will give you artifacts which contain bugs. Tomorrow you'll take this artifact, deploy it onto the Azure web app. Azure web app won't work because it has a lot of bugs. So you won't, let's say, promote it to QA, neither you promote it to prod and all that stuff, which causes an impact in your delivery out here. Which means that the software that you had to, let's say, give it in 2 sprints, you're taking 4 sprints out here, just because you have this issue, just because your lead is not able to take out time to go ahead and approve this out. But this cannot be an excuse for your delivery. Every time you cannot tell to your client, telling that, you know what, my lead, I only have one lead out here, that lead cannot approve so many things, so I want to maintain the code quality, because this approval is very required to maintain the quality of your code. You need to ensure as a lead that the right quality of code comes into play, or right quality of a code comes into the develop branch out here. So you'll have to, let's say, restrict faulty code coming into this branch. You have to protect this branch. That's the reason you put a policy. But my question is that, see, a manual approval or a manual check of your code is very, very impossible, because being a lead, you have multiple things to do. I cannot again ask you to say, okay, fine, you know what, also look at this. And I also need to ensure that you are doing this correctly. Everything should be, let's say, accurate and all that stuff. I cannot achieve this out. What do you think can be an alternative here? How do you think I can replace this process? Sorry, testing. Yes, testing, which means that I need a testing tool which can replace the manual way of doing things, which can simply go ahead, run an automated script against your feature branch, because the new code is coming from your feature branch. So I need to implement a continuous testing process. I talked about CI. Now I'm talking about CT, a continuous testing process, which can look at your code, understand what are the issues. If there are no issues, okay, fine, you're good. It should just give me a report telling that you're good. You can go ahead and merge your changes. If it is not, if there are any issues here, your merge should fail. This is the requirement. So if everything is good, merge should complete. Then if the merge completes, you will have a continuous integration happening, which will give you the artifact. If the testing fails, which means testing can only fail if there are issues with your code. If there are issues with your code, this merge should fail, which means you will not even have a continuous integration out there, which means the code is not disturbed. You are not disturbing the code. The code is good. You still have, let's say, the good code out here in this particular branch as such. And all these testing tools that you can place here are called static code analyzers. Tomorrow when you sit in an interview, the interviewer might ask you that, did you work on something like called a static code analyzer? You can say, yes, I did work on a static code analyzer. Then he will ask you, what kind of a static code analysis that you have worked on? Can you give me examples of one or two? Static code analysis that are available out there in the market are very popular. Something called as Sonar Cube. Something called Sonar Cube out here. There is something called there's something called White Source, Fortify. A lot of tools available out there in the market. There are literally a lot of tools that are available in the market, which can help you achieve something called as a static code analysis. The reason this is called a static code analysis is because your code is still in a development phase. You are not testing your code after deployment. You're testing your code before deployment. You're understanding what the code is. If you are testing the code after deployment, it's called as a functional testing or integration testing. That is post deployment. We'll also introduce what is a functional, what is an integration testing, and etc. We use tools called Selenium, APM, JMeter. All these tools are in place to do something called as a functional testing out there. So static code analysis is before deployment, or I would say before continuous integration only. Functional testing is after deployment. After deploying, instead of a manual test, you can get in a functional test. You can integrate that particular testing with your pipeline. You can call it as a Selenium or a functional test and all these things out here as such. Is any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here? As and when you give a pull request, the testing starts. The idea here is that before you merge a pull request, I need a tool to test it completely and tell you that your pull request is good. The code that is coming in your pull request, that is good. Only then your lead should approve this out. It's not related to pipeline. It's somehow related to the pipeline, or I would say in another way, it's related to the branch policy, because whatever you put in your branch policy, it will come into picture when you raise a pull request. So my question is that, or my concern is that, can I put in continuous testing process inside my branch policy? Yes, you can put continuous testing policy inside your branch policy, or continuous testing inside your branch policy, which we will look at. And we will introduce a process called Sonar, or a tool called Sonar. And I will use a cloud version of Sonar. There is something called Sonar Cube and there is something called Sonar Cloud. Sonar Cube is something that you can install on your laptop, test it out and all that stuff. But here we use something called Sonar Cloud. Both, any tool works in the same way. You just need to understand one of them. And to understand one of them, you'll need to understand what is Sonar Cloud, how do you configure Sonar Cloud with Azure DevOps and all these things out here as such. So that's what we are getting into. So before I get into Sonar and understand how do you configure Sonar, the very first question is, why do you need Sonar? And that's what we addressed in the first 15-20 minutes out there. So yes, anyone, any questions still here on why? Do you have to write any script? No, not really. You do not have to. We'll understand how to integrate that. You do not really have to write any script. It's an automated tool. So you just have to use that tool out there. So let's look at it. Let's go into Sonar. And now to go to Sonar, it's called sonarcloud.io. The website here is called sonarcloud.io. So if I go in here, now it automatically logged me in. I'll just log out and I'll come from the very starting out there. So this is the first page what you'll see. It says clean code, rockstar status, eliminate bugs and vulnerabilities and all that stuff. It says enhance your workflow with continuous code quality and continuous security, code quality, code security. It gives you a lot of things out there telling, okay, fine, this is how it looks like. You will have 3 bugs or 2 bugs and all that stuff. Your reports will look something like this. I'll say, great, let's get started. Now to get started, you'll have to log into Sonar firstly, and you'll have to log into Sonar using Azure DevOps. You can again log in with GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab and all that stuff. I'll log in with Azure DevOps in my case. I click on Azure DevOps and it's now telling, okay, fine, great, sign into your account. And I've already signed into Azure DevOps. That's the reason it did not ask me for any login and all that stuff. In your case, it might ask you, okay, fine, give your Azure credentials and all that stuff. Just go ahead and give this. And the very first page that you will see, because I've been using Sonar a lot of times, this is the page that is coming. For you, the page that can come is this. It's telling, in order to start your journey with Sonar, you will have to create an organization in Sonar, just like you created an organization in Azure DevOps. So I'll say, okay, fine, just scroll down. And if you go by the regular process, you will need to choose a plan, meaning you need to pay something for Sonar out here. It is not a free tool, it's a licensed version that you get. But in my case, I'm just testing this out, right? So in the bottom, I have just testing. You can start creating organization manually. I'll say, okay, fine, I'll create this manually. And now it's telling, okay, fine, give me the name or the key of your organization. I'll say this is my test 8am organization org. Okay, fine, this is good. In the additional information, I can say this is 8am organization. I can give the description. I can also give my URL, optional. I can give my Azure DevOps URL and all that stuff, very optional in nature. I'll say continue. Here it says, okay, fine, paid plan is like unlimited private projects. You can have a strict control over who views and all that stuff. You can define your own quality gates and everything. I'll say, you know what, a free plan is good enough for me. I just need to test this out. I'll say, okay, fine, I'm free plan. I'll create the organization out here. Now it says, okay, fine, 8am organization is good to go, ready. You can create, let's say, multiple things out here. You can start and everything. And after you create the organization, one more thing that you need to create is called as a project under the organization. Same thing. In Azure DevOps, you create the organization, then create a project. In Sonar also, you create the organization and then start creating a project under Sonar out here. So I'll do one thing. I'll come here after I create the organization. I'll say add. I'll say analyze a new project. And here I'll say, okay, fine. I'm just testing. So I'll create a project manually. Here I'll tell, okay, fine. I am basically a new project. I'll tell something like 8 a.m. project. It has two things, a project key and a project name. So I'll say 8 a.m. project, US East 2, something which is unique. So that's the reason I'm giving something called 8 a.m. project, US East 2 out here, 8 a.m. project, US East 2 out here. Project is public. When you start working with an organization, it will become a private project out here, which only your, let's say, Azure DevOps people can have organization with. I mean, can have, let's say, an access to. So I'll say it's a public project out here. I'll say set it up. And now it says, okay, fine. Organization is ready. Project is also ready. So two things are ready right now. An organization and also a project inside this particular organization out here. So I created the organization and then I created a project inside the organization. This is all something that I did at the Sonar end. Now, I also have an Azure DevOps organization and a project inside Azure DevOps. This is also something that I do have. Now, my point here is that all my projects inside Azure DevOps have a service called repository. And all those repositories or those, let's say, code has to be scanned by Sonar projects, which means that I need to establish some kind of a connection between Sonar and Azure DevOps out here. So Azure DevOps and Sonar. This is the connection that I need to establish between between two things called Azure DevOps and Sonar, between two different software as a service. Azure DevOps is a software as a service. Sonar is also a software as a service. I'm trying to establish a connection between two platforms, between Azure DevOps and Sonar. Both of them are SaaS offerings out here. So what I'll do is I'll come back to my Azure DevOps. I'll go into something called project settings. And in the project settings, there is something called as service connections. Very, very important. Service connections will let you connect to external sources, like let's say Sonar, like let's say portal.azure.com. Even portal.azure.com is an external source for Azure DevOps out here. So two different external sources. That's what it's telling you. Service connection helps you manage, protect, and reuse authentication to external services. I will say, okay, fine, create a service connection. And in my case, I don't want AWS, I don't want Azure right now. I will say SonarCube and Sonar Cloud. Both of them are there. Now, just a quick heads up, guys, is that see, when you are typing Sonar in a service connection, you might not get it. The reason being your Azure DevOps should have a Sonar extension already installed. So if you do not get it, let's look at extensions in my project. Let's go to, let's say this particular, let's say organization settings. And there's something called extensions. In the extensions, again, I'm coming into extensions. Oh, sorry, I'm coming into, let's say, extensions out here. Fine. I'm coming into extensions under the organization settings. And these are all the extensions that is already installed for me. Do you see Sonar Cloud is already installed for me? In your case, it might not be installed. Click on Browse Marketplace and search for Sonar Cloud. It kind of comes like this. Click on this out. Say get it free. And once you click on get it free, it will take you to another page where it will let you install Sonar Cloud extension on your organization out there as such. So let's go there. It will take some time out there, and now it will tell okay fine loading organization, and it's now telling me here that this extension is already installed for this organization. In your case, you will have the install button out there. Just click on install, and once installed, just refresh the screen, and you should be able to see the Sonar Cloud extension installed by Sonar source out here as such. So I have the Sonar Cloud extension in place, installed and everything great. Now I'll come back into my project again, go into project settings, come into service connections, and say create a new service connection out here. So very firstly, if you are able to see Sonar, maybe Azure DevOps has installed it, let's say in place. 99% of the times it's not installed. If you click on Sonar out here, you might not find Sonar here. So please go into your organization settings, install the extension, come back again. You'll be able to see a Sonar Cloud out here. I'll say next. Here, it's asking me for something called what? Sonar Cloud token. I don't know how to get a token. Now it's telling, okay, fine. Authentication token needs to be generated through Sonar Cloud. Go to my account, security, generate tokens. So I'll come here, click on account, my account, say security, and say generate a token. Again, there are a lot of tokens that I generated over a lot of, let's say, demos out there. I'll just say this is 8 AM US East 2 token. I'll say generate. Now it's telling, okay, fine, this token is generated. Do you want to copy this? I'll say yes, copy this out. Go back to your service connections. Paste the token here out here as such. Click on verify. Verification succeeded. Now it's telling, okay, fine. The verification, meaning you have given me the right token, verified this. I'll be able to establish a connection. I'll say the name of the connection is 8 AM Sonar connection. It can be anything. You can put a Sonar connection, whatever it is. I'll say description. This is a Sonar connection out here. Okay, verify and save. So now I have a connection between Azure DevOps and Sonar out here. This is the connection that I have established in the very first place, and I have a service connection now which is talking to Sonar. So Azure DevOps is now talking to Sonar. Sonar is talking to Azure DevOps. The authentication is done. Now